The night SGA's legacy was put on trial, the entire NBA thought Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was about to answer the question once and for all. But instead, after Game 6, the question got louder, colder, and more dangerous. Was SGA really built for this moment? Or had the San Antonio Spurs just exposed the one weakness nobody wanted to admit was there? This was not just another playoff loss. This was not just another bad shooting night. This was a public trial under the brightest lights in basketball. A two-time MVP, a champion, the face of Oklahoma City, suddenly looked trapped inside a series he was supposed to control. The trophy was already on his resume. The numbers were already historic. The respect, at least on paper, should have been untouchable. But playoff basketball has a cruel way of stripping away the paper and asking one simple question: what can you do when the other team already knows every move you want to make? San Antonio did not walk into this series afraid of Shai. They walked in prepared for him. They sent length at him. They sent strength at him. They sent young defenders with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Every drive felt crowded. Every pull-up felt contested. Every possession became a test of patience, timing, and trust. And behind all of it stood Victor Wembanyama, the kind of defensive presence who can turn a normal lane into a dead end. For most of the season, SGA had looked like a man with answers to every defensive problem. He could slow the game down, change speeds, draw contact, get to his spots, and make elite defenders look helpless. But the Spurs gave him a different kind of exam. They did not just try to stop his scoring. They tried to disconnect him from the rhythm of the entire Thunder offense. They forced him to give the ball up earlier than he wanted. They made him think twice before attacking. They turned his comfort zone into a cage. And once the numbers started slipping, the noise became impossible to ignore. Fans began asking if his regular season dominance was hiding something. Analysts started comparing his playoff struggles to the kind of postseason drop-offs that follow stars for years. Critics brought up Kobe, they brought up Jordan, they brought up Harden, and suddenly, SGA was not only battling San Antonio, he was battling history, reputation, expectation, and every hot take waiting to bury him. Then came Game 6, the night everything nearly broke. Oklahoma City was not just beaten, they were overwhelmed. The Spurs ran the floor, owned the third quarter, and played with the confidence of a team that believed it had solved the MVP. SGA finished with only 15 points, and the image was brutal. The league's most decorated guard looking for space that never arrived, searching for rhythm that never came, walking into a Game 7 with the entire basketball world asking whether he had any answer left. And when he was asked how he could get back to himself, his response only made the storm worse. "I'm not too sure, to be honest." That sentence traveled faster than any highlight. It sounded honest, but honesty can be dangerous when people are waiting for weakness. To Thunder fans, it felt terrifying. To Spurs fans, it felt like confirmation. To the national media, it was blood in the water. But this is where the story becomes bigger than one bad quote. Because the greatest players are not remembered for never being trapped. They are remembered for what they do after the trap closes. Game 7 was waiting. Home court was waiting. The Spurs were waiting. Wembanyama was waiting. And SGA had 48 minutes to decide whether this series would become the beginning of a scar or the start of a legend. So, before we go deeper, tell me where you are watching from right now. If you believe SGA was unfairly disrespected, press 1. If you think the Spurs truly exposed him, press 2. And if you want more NBA stories with pressure, drama, legacy, and real basketball emotion, subscribe to the channel. Because this series was only getting started. The Spurs found the blueprint. Game 1 was supposed to be SGA's reminder to the NBA that the MVP still owned the moment. Instead, San Antonio walked in with a plan that changed the entire series. The Spurs did not defend him like a normal scorer. They crowded his drives, showed early help, forced the ball out of his hands, and made every possession feel uncomfortable. SGA wanted rhythm, San Antonio gave him traffic. He wanted space. The Spurs gave him bodies. He wanted to control the pace. They made him react. Stephon Castle became the first problem. Young, strong, and fearless, he guarded SGA like the trophies meant nothing. He stayed attached, absorbed contact, fought through actions, and refused to panic when Shai changed speeds. That mattered, because SGA usually wins by making defenders lose balance. Castle made him work for every inch. But Castle was only the first wall. Behind him were Devin Vassell, Dylan Harper, and a swarm of long Spurs defenders ready to rotate. And behind all of them was Victor Wembanyama, turning the paint into a place where every layup, floater, and pass had to be perfect. That was the real trap. Against most teams, if SGA beats the first defender, the defense collapses. Against San Antonio, beating the first defender only sent him into Wembanyama's shadow. Suddenly, the MVP looked less comfortable. His reads were slower. His shots were tougher. His rhythm was broken. By the end of Game 1, the Spurs had done more than win possessions. They had planted doubt. They showed the league that SGA could be crowded, rushed, and forced away from his favorite spots. They made the Thunder look uncertain. They made the MVP look human. And once San Antonio believed the blueprint worked, every stop became louder, every miss became evidence, and every SGA possession became a test of his greatness. The noise became the opponent. Once the Spurs showed they had a real answer for SGA, the series stopped being quiet. Every miss had a meaning. Every forced pass became a clip. Every frustrated possession turned into another piece of evidence for people who had been waiting all season to question him. That is the problem with being an MVP. You do not get judged like everyone else. A normal star can have a rough night and people call it basketball. But when your name is sitting next to the greatest players in the world, a rough night becomes a debate. A bad quarter becomes a warning sign. A playoff struggle becomes a legacy conversation. And suddenly, the conversation around SGA got ugly. Critics started saying he was not close to the legends people compared him to. Fans brought up Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, not because it was fair, but because greatness always gets measured against the highest standard. Others compared his playoff efficiency drop to James Harden. The name no MVP guard once attached to a postseason struggle. The message was simple and brutal. Regular season dominance is not enough if the playoffs expose you. For SGA, that had to sting, because he had spent the entire year building the case that he was not just great, but different. He was calm under pressure, he was efficient, he was impossible to speed up. He played with a cold confidence that made defenders look helpless. But against San Antonio, that calm was being tested in a way fans had not seen before. The Spurs were not just taking away shots, they were taking away comfort. And when a superstar loses comfort, the basketball world notices immediately. Every possession became part of the story. If SGA passed out of a double team, people asked why he was not attacking. If he forced a shot, people said he was pressing. If he drew contact, people called him a foul merchant. If he stayed patient, people said he was not aggressive enough. There was no safe answer anymore. That is how pressure works in the playoffs. It does not only come from the defender in front of you, it comes from the crowd, the media, the history books, and the idea that one bad series can rewrite how people talk about your entire career. Meanwhile, San Antonio kept feeding the doubt. Stephon Castle played with the confidence of someone who believed he could stay in front of the MVP. Wembanyama protected the rim like he was guarding the future of the franchise. The Spurs bench celebrated every stop like it confirmed what they already knew. They were not hoping SGA would struggle anymore. They expected it, and that expectation made everything heavier for Oklahoma City. Because the Thunder were not built to survive, with SGA looking ordinary, their identity depended on him bending the game. When he controlled the floor, everyone else looked better. The shooters got cleaner looks. The cutters found space. The defense had to collapse. But when San Antonio kept him in traffic, the entire Thunder offense started to feel tighter, slower, and more predictable. That was when the real fear entered the series. Not that SGA could have one bad game. Every superstar has one. The fear was that the Spurs had found something repeatable, something they could bring night after night, something that made the MVP look less like a problem and more like a puzzle they were solving in real time. And once that idea spread, the noise became impossible to separate from the basketball. SGA was no longer just trying to beat Castle, Wembanyama, and the Spurs defense. He was trying to beat the headlines before they were written. He was trying to beat the clips before they went viral. He was trying to beat every voice saying that maybe his numbers were louder than his moment. That is a lonely place for a superstar, because no teammate can carry your reputation for you. No coach can answer the legacy question from the sideline. At some point, the ball comes back to your hands, the defense loads up, the world watches, and you either change the story or become trapped inside it. By the middle of the series, SGA was trapped inside it. The trap was bigger than one defender. At first, people thought this was just about Stephon Castle guarding SGA. But the truth was much scarier for Oklahoma City. This was not one defender. This was a 5-man trap. Castle gave SGA the first problem. He stayed physical, stayed disciplined, and made Shai fight for every inch. He did not need to steal the ball or block shots. His job was to break SGA's rhythm, and he did it by turning every possession into resistance. Then came the second layer. Devin Vassell, Dylan Harper, and the Spurs wings waited in the gaps, ready to shrink the floor. If SGA drove one way, help was already there. If he paused, San Antonio reset. If he passed, the Spurs recovered fast enough to keep OKC from getting clean looks. And behind everyone was Victor Wembanyama. That was what made the trap feel impossible. The Spurs guards could pressure harder because they knew Wembanyama was protecting the rim. Even when SGA beat the first defender, he was not free. He was driving into the shadow of the most terrifying shot blocker in the league. So SGA had to think on every move. Should he shoot, pass, float it higher, attack earlier, pull up before the help arrives? Those tiny questions slowed him down. And when a defense makes a superstar think instead of flow, the defense has already won part of the battle. San Antonio did not just defend SGA. They made his favorite spots uncomfortable. They made patience look like hesitation. They made control look like doubt. The Spurs had built a maze around the MVP. San Antonio turned doubt into a weapon. By the time the series reached the middle games, the Spurs were no longer wondering if their plan could work. They knew it could. And that belief changed everything. Game 4 became the proof. San Antonio stopped chasing SGA with panic and started guarding him with control. They did not throw reckless double teams just to get the ball away from him. They trusted their defenders. They trusted their rotations. They trusted Wembanyama behind the play. And most importantly, they trusted that SGA was already feeling the weight of every possession. That is when doubt became part of the defense. Every time SGA caught the ball, he was not just looking at Castle. He was looking at the memory of the last miss, the last crowded drive, the last possession where the lane disappeared. The Spurs had put those images in his head. Now, they were forcing him to play against them. This is what great playoff defense does. It does not only contest shots. It changes what a superstar believes is available. A normal pull-up suddenly feels rushed. A normal drive suddenly feels dangerous. A normal pass suddenly feels like surrender. And once that happens, the defense has entered the player's mind. San Antonio's biggest strength was its connection. One defender pressured, another shaded over, a third watched the corner. Wembanyama guarded the rim without needing to chase everything. They moved like one unit, and that made the floor feel smaller than it really was. Oklahoma City kept waiting for SGA to break the pattern. One big quarter, one hot stretch. One run where he would remind everyone that no coverage could hold him forever. But the Spurs kept answering with patience. They were physical without losing discipline, aggressive without becoming reckless, young but not afraid. That was the part that made this series so dangerous for the Thunder. San Antonio did not look like a team hoping for an upset. They looked like a team convinced it belonged here. And as SGA's efficiency dropped, the noise around him grew louder. Every bad number became a headline. Every difficult shot became part of the argument. People were no longer asking whether the Spurs could slow him down. They were asking whether this version of SGA could still be trusted to carry Oklahoma City when the season was on the line. That is a brutal place for a superstar to live, because when you are the MVP, there is no hiding. If the team loses, your name comes first. If the offense stalls, your decision-making gets questioned. If the defense crowds you, people do not want explanations. They want answers. And San Antonio had made the questions painfully clear. Could SGA beat elite length without relying on rhythm? Could he punish single coverage when the help was waiting behind it? Could he keep trusting teammates when the world demanded he take over? Could he stay patient without looking passive? Could he force the issue without looking desperate? The Spurs were not just defending him anymore. They were forcing him to define himself. That is why Game 4 and Game 5 felt so heavy. This series was no longer about adjustments on a whiteboard. It had become psychological. San Antonio had found the line between pressure and panic, and they kept pushing SGA right up against it. For the Thunder, the danger was obvious. If their MVP solved the puzzle, the series could swing back fast. But if he did not, every possession would keep feeding the same terrifying narrative. Maybe the Spurs had found the one defense that could make Shai Gilgeous-Alexander look ordinary. And in playoff basketball, once ordinary becomes the word attached to an MVP, the storm is already here. The Game 6 collapse. Then came Game 6, the night everything nearly broke. Oklahoma City did not just lose. They got buried. San Antonio played with force, confidence, and control. The Spurs defended without fear, ran after every Thunder miss, and turned the third quarter into a statement that shook the entire series. For SGA, it was the lowest point. The shots were not falling. The lanes were crowded. Castle stayed attached. The help defense arrived on time. Wembanyama's presence made every drive feel dangerous, and the Thunder offense, usually built around Shai's calm control, started to look desperate. Then the final number hit, 15 points. For a two-time MVP, that was all the internet needed. Critics did not want context, they did not care about the coverage, the rotations, or the way San Antonio loaded up on him. They saw the stat line and called it exposure. But the real storm came after the game. When SGA was asked how he could get back to himself before Game 7, he did not give a heroic answer. He did not promise revenge. He simply admitted he was not too sure. That sentence became a headline. Thunder fans heard fear. Spurs fans heard confirmation. The media heard weakness. And suddenly, the story was no longer just about one bad game. It was about whether SGA had answers at all. That is what made Game 6 so brutal. San Antonio did not just beat him on the scoreboard. They seemed to take away his certainty. And for SGA, certainty is everything. His game is built on control, patience, and rhythm. But now, the calm was gone. The pressure was louder than ever. Game 7 was waiting, and there was nowhere left to hide. Either SGA would remind everyone why he was the MVP, or the Spurs would send him into the summer with the loudest questions of his career. 48 minutes to save the story. Game 7 was no longer just a basketball game. It was a courtroom, a battlefield, and a mirror all at once. For SGA, everything was sitting inside those 48 minutes. The MVP trophies, the championship memories, the regular season dominance, the criticism, the jokes, the comparison to Harden, the whispers that maybe his numbers looked bigger than his moments. All of it was waiting for him when the ball went up. That is the weight of being the face of a franchise. You can carry your team for months, but one series can make people question the whole journey. You can win awards, but if the biggest game ends badly, the world does not talk about the awards first. It talks about the moment you missed. And San Antonio knew that. The Spurs walked into Game 7 with the confidence of a team that believed the pressure was on Oklahoma City, not them. They were young, hungry, fearless, and already playing with house money. Victor Wembanyama looked like the future had arrived early. Stephon Castle looked like he belonged in the fire. Their defense had already shaken the MVP. Their belief had already survived 6 games. Now they were one win away from taking everything. For Oklahoma City, the message was simple. SGA had to be SGA again. Not careful, not passive, not trapped between forcing shots and making the right play. He had to attack with clarity. He had to turn pressure into rhythm. He had to remind San Antonio that a blueprint only matters until the superstar burns it. But that is easier to say than to do when every possession feels like a judgment. If he passed early, people would say he disappeared. If he shot too much, people would say he panicked. If he waited for the game to come to him, people would say he lacked urgency. There was no clean path through the noise. The only answer was production. And that is what made the night so dangerous. Because SGA was not entering Game 7 empty-handed. He had been here before, he had won massive games, he had already proven he could perform under pressure. But this version of pressure felt different. This was not just about winning a series. It was about stopping a narrative before it hardened into reputation. Across from him, Wembanyama represented something even bigger than San Antonio. He represented the next era, the player everyone believed could take over the league, the giant at the rim, the calm superstar, the young force who did not look scared of anyone's resume. If SGA failed here, people would not simply say the Thunder lost. They would say the league had moved forward without waiting for him. That is what made the matchup feel historic. It was not just Oklahoma City versus San Antonio. It was the present being challenged by the future. SGA trying to protect his place, Wembanyama trying to claim his, Castle trying to prove the MVP could be bothered, the Spurs trying to show that their rise was not coming someday. It was happening now. Inside the Thunder locker room, there was no need for speeches. Everyone knew the truth. Their season needed SGA. Their offense needed SGA. Their belief needed SGA. He did not have to play perfect, but he had to play fearless. He had to look at the same defense that had trapped him, crowded him, and embarrassed him in Game 6 and decide that this time, the story would not be written by San Antonio. Because in games like this, legends are not made by avoiding pressure. They are made by stepping directly into it. And when Game 7 began, the entire basketball world leaned in for the answer. Was SGA still the MVP who could bend any defense in the league? Or had the Spurs already shown everyone the truth? The MVP finally fought back. When Game 7 started, San Antonio hit first. The Spurs looked calm, confident, and ready. They jumped ahead early, forced Oklahoma City to chase, and made every Thunder mistake feel heavy. Wembanyama changed shots, Castle stayed aggressive, and the Spurs' wings kept shrinking the floor. But this time, SGA did not disappear. This time, he attacked. He got downhill faster. He trusted his mid-range. He made quicker decisions before the help could trap him. He used his body, his pace, and his footwork to fight through the same defense that had made him look uncomfortable in Game 6. For the first time in days, the MVP looked like the MVP again. Every basket changed the feeling in the building. Every drive brought belief back to Oklahoma City. Every tough jumper felt like SGA was answering the critics in real time. He was not just scoring, he was fighting for his name, his team, and his legacy. By the time he reached 31 points through 3 quarters, the narrative had shifted. This was not a superstar shrinking. This was a superstar carrying a wounded offense against a defense built to stop him. But San Antonio refused to break. Every time SGA pushed, the Spurs answered. Wembanyama made winning plays. Castle stayed composed. Champagnie hit big shots. Fox gave them another creator. The Spurs did not need one hero because the whole team kept showing up. That was the cruel part. SGA finally gave the answer everyone demanded. But San Antonio still had the stronger team response. He proved he could fight back. He proved he had not folded. He proved Game 6 did not define him. Now, the only question was whether his greatness would be enough to save Oklahoma City. The Spurs had one more answer. SGA had finally turned the fight back in his direction, but San Antonio never lost its balance. That was the difference in Game 7. Oklahoma City had the biggest individual performance on the floor, but the Spurs had the stronger collective answer. Every time Shai pulled the Thunder close, someone in a San Antonio jersey stepped into the moment without fear. Wembanyama did not need to score 40 to control the game. His presence was enough to bend decisions, change shots, and make Oklahoma City think twice near the rim. Castle kept playing with the confidence of a young defender who no longer cared about the MVP label. He did not win every possession, but he kept making SGA work. And in a Game 7, making a superstar work for everything is already a victory. Then came Julian Champagnie. His shooting became one of the biggest separators of the night. Every time the Thunder crowd started to rise, every time SGA made a play that felt like it could flip the game, Champagnie answered with a shot that cut the emotion out of the building. Those threes were not just points, they were momentum killers. De'Aaron Fox added another layer of pressure. His speed forced Oklahoma City to guard more than just Wembanyama. His attacks kept the Thunder defense from loading up in one place. And that mattered because San Antonio's greatest strength was not one superstar taking every shot. It was the way different players kept appearing at exactly the right time. But the defining moment came from Luke Kornet. With Wembanyama in foul trouble and the game still hanging in the air, Kornet delivered the kind of defensive play that changes a series. A transition block, a sudden stop. A play that sucked the energy out of Oklahoma City and gave San Antonio one last surge of belief. It was not the flashiest name. It was not the player everyone expected to decide the night. But that is what made it so painful for the Thunder. SGA had answered like a superstar, and still, a role player made the play that tilted the game. After that, Oklahoma City looked rushed. The Thunder were still close enough to fight, but the rhythm was gone. Their late possessions became desperate, the shots got longer, the decisions got tighter. San Antonio's defense closed in one more time, forcing Oklahoma City into difficult attempts when clean looks were needed most. And the clock became the Spurs' best defender. SGA kept fighting, but time kept disappearing. Every miss felt heavier. Every rebound felt final. Every San Antonio possession felt like another step toward a new chapter in the NBA. When the final stretch arrived, the truth was brutal. SGA had not failed in the way people expected after Game 6. He did not hide. He did not fold. He did not let the moment swallow him. He gave Oklahoma City a Game 7 performance worthy of an MVP. But San Antonio gave something bigger than one performance. They gave a team response. That is why this loss hurt differently. It was not the easy story of a superstar disappearing. It was the harder story of a superstar showing up and still being beaten by a team that had more answers across the floor. The Spurs had Wembanyama's gravity, Castle's toughness, Champagnie's shooting, Fox's pressure, Kornet's block, and a defense that stayed connected until the final horn. For Oklahoma City, that was devastating. Because when your best player gives you everything and it still is not enough, the questions become deeper. Not just about SGA, but about the roster, the injuries, the support, the adjustments, and whether the Thunder had enough counters once San Antonio took away their first option. For San Antonio, it was a statement. They were not just a young team ahead of schedule. They were a team built for moments. They walked into Oklahoma City, absorbed SGA's best punch, and still found a way to stand taller at the end. That is how the Spurs took the night. Not by proving SGA was weak, but by proving they were stronger together. What this loss really means. So what does this series really say about SGA? It does not say he is fake. It does not say he is overrated. It does not say the MVP trophies were empty. That would be too simple, and this story was never simple. What it says is that greatness on paper and greatness under pressure are two different tests. And San Antonio forced Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to take the hardest test of his career. In Game 7, he answered part of it. He scored, attacked, adjusted, and fought through the same defense that had made him look uncertain earlier in the series. He showed that Game 6 was not the whole truth. He showed that when the pressure reached its loudest point, he still had the courage to step into the storm. But basketball is not a one-man exam. That is where the Spurs taught the bigger lesson. San Antonio won because they were connected. They trusted the game plan, they trusted the next pass, they trusted the defender behind them, they trusted that if one player got beat, another player would be there. And in the biggest moments, they did not wait for one savior. They became a team full of answers. That is the strategic difference between surviving and advancing. Oklahoma City had SGA fighting against the trap. San Antonio had 5 players building it, adjusting it, and believing in it. The Spurs did not need perfection from one superstar because their system created courage for everyone else. Wembanyama changed the floor. Castle changed the pressure. Champagnie changed the momentum. Fox changed the pace. Cornet changed the final minutes. And that is why this loss should not destroy SGA's reputation. It should sharpen it. Every great player eventually runs into a wall that talent alone cannot break. For some, that wall becomes an excuse. For others, it becomes the moment that forces evolution. SGA now knows exactly what the next level demands. More counters, faster reads, more trust in teammates, more ways to punish elite length before the defense gets fully set, more leadership when the game stops feeling comfortable. That is not failure. That is the price of chasing the kind of legacy people remember. For the Thunder, the lesson is just as clear. A superstar can carry you far, but a championship team needs multiple pressure points. When one option gets crowded, the next option has to punish the defense. When the opponent builds a maze around your best player, the rest of the roster has to become the escape route. Injuries hurt Oklahoma City, but championship windows do not always wait for perfect health. For the Spurs, this was a declaration. The future is not coming later, it is already here. Wembanyama is not just a highlight machine, he is the center of a defensive identity that can terrify elite scorers. Castle is not just a young guard, he is a competitor with the nerve to take the toughest assignment, and San Antonio is not just a young team with potential. They are a team learning how to win together before the rest of the league is ready for them. But the most human lesson is this: losing one battle does not erase who you are. SGA walked into Game 7 with the world questioning him, and he did not hide. He gave Oklahoma City everything he had. The result hurt, but the effort mattered. Sometimes sports are cruel because they do not always reward the player who fights the hardest. Sometimes two truths can exist at once. SGA was great, and the Spurs were better. That is what makes this series unforgettable. It was not a collapse. It was not a fraud being exposed. It was a superstar meeting a defense built perfectly to challenge him, and a young team proving that belief, discipline, and unity can stand up to individual brilliance. SGA's story is not over. If anything, this may become the chapter that changes him. The great ones do not run from nights like this. They study them, they carry them, they return with new answers. And if Shai is truly the player his resume says he is, this pain will not become his ending. It will become his fuel. Because legacy is not built only by winning when everything is smooth. Legacy is built by what a player does after the league sees him struggle. And now, the whole NBA will be watching what SGA does next. If you believe SGA will come back stronger, press 1" the comments. If you think Wembanyama and the Spurs just opened a new era, press 2. If you believe this series proved team basketball still beats superstar isolation, press 3. And if you want more NBA stories with real drama, real emotion, and real lessons from the biggest moments in basketball, make sure to like this video, share it with another NBA fan, and subscribe to the channel for the next story.